Good morning. I see some familiar faces here. You guys all pumped up, ready with your coffees, awake, alert? Great. I'm so happy to be following Nicholas, actually. I thought that was a fantastic talk to kind of set the tone. He talked about brand and purpose and utility and customer. And I feel like it's a natural follow-on for me to come on with like a technology edge to the whole conversation. So welcome to Magento Singapore. Before I kick off, how many of you have seen me on stage in some other country? Okay, just a few, just a few. Okay, I'm asking the question because I have spoken at Magento conferences before. We chose to sponsor the Singapore one as platinum sponsors, and they've very kindly given us 30 minutes to speak to you about anything, but I chose to talk about the subject that I'm most passionate about, which is the web and performance. And I have repeated this message time and time again. I don't think repetition spoils the prayer, so if you've heard this before, bear with me. It is still interesting and definitely worth your time. Cool. So who am I? My name is Monisha. I obviously work for Google. I do work for a team called Product Partnerships. We are the team that actually helps the product folks develop. And when I say product, I mean Chrome and AMP. We help them develop relevant products, and then we help them bring it out into APAC through partnerships. So that's what I do. I don't know if you already know, but Google cares about the web a lot. So we're very invested, not just in building great browser experiences for Chrome, but we also have a team that just works on web platform. And we help developers around the world across browsers build some amazing experience through launching new APIs. So before we go any further, let's just set the stage and kind of set the scene about what we're going to talk about, right? And I don't need to tell you this. You guys know your industry much better than I do. But e-commerce is definitely in the midst of a tremendous transformation. It's going through a lot of change. A lot of new things are happening. And you guys have to grapple with this on a daily basis. I'm going to move here because I don't have speaker notes for the first time. Just got to look at my slides. Cool. So it's a huge opportunity, right? This is the global numbers, 3.5 trillion. In the US, it's 720 billion. So it's a massive opportunity. And this strange thing called connectivity is really changing the way e-commerce is growing in the world, right? And what do I mean by that? There are obviously tons more devices that are connected to the internet. So there's 11 billion apparently in the world as of 2018. More today, surely. On average, smartphone users, that's you and me, unbelievable. I never thought this could be true. But we apparently spend 3 hours on our mobile on a daily basis. And finally, there are 2 billion digital shoppers around the world as part of our global population who transact online, right? So these are stunning stats. But what connectivity has done is it's also had a dramatic change on the way a user or a consumer interacts with a brand. And as Nicholas was pointing out in his previous talk, that means that they just change their expectations. They change what they expect to see, what they want. And this is happening, this is happening with me as well, right? Like, so I just pick up my phone. Anytime I want anything, the first thing I do is pick up my phone to check a question on anything on the planet. So obviously search is relevant, but even transactions. Where do I buy boots? Where do I buy winter boots? Where do I buy, clothes for my kids or something for my parents? It doesn't matter which country. It doesn't matter what the item. You just go onto the internet to find what you want first. You also expect that information to be delivered to you pretty instantly. Your expectation is, of course, we're going to have the answer online somewhere, right? And it's not just that. When you actually get to transact, you expect that whatever you expect, whether it's a good or a service, you expect that to come to you immediately. So same-day shopping, immediate delivery, all of these things are things that you're looking for. My behavior pattern has changed. So I used to be a mother who used to look at the calendar and plan, all my children's friends' birthday parties out in advance. So I would always have a present at home. I would have a book or something that I could give them. But I don't do that anymore. Why? Because Amazon can deliver it to me in 3 hours. Right? So if I've forgotten tomorrow there's a birthday party, I just go onto Amazon and I pick the next Paw Patrol water bottle and it comes to me in 3 hours. I don't even have to think about it. So our expectations have changed, and we're seeing stats that show that there's been a 180% increase in searches for shopping lists. So that's like, travel list or packing list or, different types of lists online. There's been a 250% increase in searches for where to buy. Obvious, we should have that answer somewhere online. And like I said, there's been a 200% increase in searches for same-day shipping, right? So this tells us that our consumer, that Nicholas was talking about earlier, is curious, demanding, and impatient. You can't take them for granted. And so, of course, as an expectation, they expect to be engaged and delighted at all points, right? They want you to build an amazing web experience. They want it to be fast and seamless and, engaging with content. Apparently, you get 50 milliseconds to form your first impression on your site or app. That's literally it. If you go to a broken experience, you're not going to try a second time. You're going to say, oh, why don't I just go to the other brand that obviously is going to have the same thing that I want? 88% of consumers, if they have a bad experience, are less likely to come back to your site. So it's not even like they give you a second chance. And if you invest in building a great experience on the web, apparently there's a 200% increase in conversion if the user face is well designed, right? So these are some stats that kind of tell you a little more about this user that we're talking about. What does this mean for the business? Sorry, this clicker is very sensitive. For a business, this means that you guys are sitting there faced with all this data. You're faced with all these decisions that you've got to make. How do I build? Where do I build? Who do I build for? How do I deliver? What sort of fulfillment? It's all sorts of questions that we've got lots of data, but only 1% has been analyzed. So we haven't even tackled the problem in any deep way as yet. And the other thing that you've got to contend with is the fact that 50% of visitors will abandon your site if it takes more than 3 seconds to load. So I was saying you have 50 milliseconds to create an impression, but really if you take longer than 3 seconds, you've lost them, right? So in this very complex environment that e-commerce players are operating in, where there's connectivity and there's consumer and there's confusion and there's competition, you're probably asking yourselves the question, okay, so what? What do I do, right? And Google's answer historically has been focus on the user and all else will follow. And this is a principle that we've applied across a lot of our products. We've seen a lot of our products go to 1 billion users and beyond. And really, it's very important to try and understand that customer of yours. And again, like I said, I'm reiterating some of what Nicholas said, but I think it's critical to see where they are, who they are, and what they want. So the first thing we would say is, meet your user where they are, right? And we believe, this is a fairly bold statement to make, but we believe that's the web. Your user is going to probably start their journey on the web. If you've got a loyal, engaged user that's downloaded an app, fair enough, they're going to go to the app and have their transaction. But if you're looking to grow more users, the likely chance is that they're going to come to your property through a web experience of some sort. We also have statistics to say the same thing. So the web is the destination for e-commerce. 53% of user time that's spent on any retail surface is on the web. And of course, that's a combination of mobile and desktop. And we've seen more transactions on desktop versus mobile on the web. But there is a lot of time being spent on the web versus an app. So the next point that I constantly drive home about, bang on about, is the fact that speed is critical, right? And I'm glad people are starting to say this. This is Mark Åkerström, the president of Expedia, said this at an AGM. Speed benefits deliver conversion benefits. There's no two ways about that. Speed equals revenue, right? So that's the other point that you've got to take home and allow to sink in and distribute amongst your organizations. Because if you look at it, the slower your speed, the higher your bounce rate, and the more chances that people will not view what you want them to view, right? And this graph kind of explains some of it. But if you really want me to break it down, as page load time increases, so if it's between 1 and 3 seconds, the probability of a bounce increases to 32%. That's pretty high. You want to avoid that. If it's 1 to 5 seconds, the probability increases to 90%. And if you go any more than that, it's going to be over 100%, right? So speed is absolutely important if you want to give your users that fantastic first impression and keep them there, keep them engaged, keep them wanting more. Speed is also a search ranking factor. I mean, I am from Google, biggest search engine. Why are we interested? You're obviously wondering what I'm doing here, but it is an important factor in search rankings, right? If you increase your speed, if your speed and performance improves, the chances are that you will appear at a different position on your search ranking page. And speed shouldn't only be an engineering problem, right? We have these conversations, we go to these Magento conferences, we talk to people at our booth, we even attend other conferences, and we end up talking to a lot of the developer community. And developers get it, like they see it, they get it, and they take it back to their organizations. And for some reason, it just sits there. It sits with the product teams, it sits with the engineering teams. It never goes beyond that. It doesn't get to business, and that's where half the challenge is. And that's why we continuously bang on about this point, because it's important that the entire organization recognizes that speed is important, speed equals revenue. So at 1-800-Flowers, for instance, it's the CMO that makes the decisions. And the CMO leads a cross-functional unit to invest in technology. And what that means is he takes care of analytics, he takes care of technology, he takes care of marketing campaigns, he takes care of everything surrounding customer acquisition and engagement. And as a result, they've seen a 50% increase in conversion, and their site has gotten 3 times faster, right? So it's important to spread the message around the org. So if you want to do something about it, performance definitely matters. Hopefully you've got that point. If you want to do something about performance on the web, the first thing to do is actually measure it. Because as developers, you're going to struggle to make a business case with your organization unless you have some concrete data, right? What's the first thing that talks to the business side of the world? It's revenue. So this is a tool that we launched called the Revenue Impact Calculator, and you can put in some small metrics to give people a sense of how much money you're leaving on the table, right? So this is just a random example of I think it's a company that's delivering revenue of 1.5 million per year, and they've got a speed of 4.8 seconds when their site takes 4.8 seconds to load. If they were to invest in reducing that by even 1 second, they would increase their revenue by about $35,000, which is 20%, so pretty significant. And this happens not with any major new tech or any major UX or design changes. This is just improving speed. So it does make a huge difference. And this sort of data is easy to take back to your organization. The second one is a tool that you might want to explore. It's called httparchive.org. It's open resource. It kind of crawls a lot of websites and takes account of what features they're using and how they perform. They've got different reports on the internet. Like there's one called the State of the Web. And within that, you can actually do a search for Magento sites and get an understanding of how Magento sites are performing on the web. Now, I'm going to show you some numbers. The intention is not to name and shame, and we're not pointing fingers at Magento. We get it. You're e-commerce, and you must be using a lot of images. It's a difficult experience to deliver. But from what we've seen, Magento sites are heavier than the average site. It takes time for them to load the first content for paint, which is just like your first impression. And it also takes a lot longer for time to interactive. That's 18 seconds, right? So imagine if I had to just stand here for 18 seconds and not say anything. I've done it before. And it just gets awkward, right? Imagine if your user is sitting there, clicking on the phone, trying to get what they want, and you're making them wait for 18 seconds. That's a lot. So the other thing that you could use is Lighthouse. Lighthouse is another tool that we've developed. It's available through developer tools in Chrome, very easy to access. You just go in, it does audits for all your site. We have a booth today outside. We will be there with laptops. We can do Lighthouse checks. If you allow us to do a Lighthouse check, we might even give you a notebook. So come and see us, and we'll definitely give you some feedback on your current site and performance. But if you can do it yourself, if you open a browser, go into developer tools and run a Lighthouse audit, you'll see that it scores you against various factors. So over 100, it scores you on performance, your progressive web app, best practices, SEO, things like that. But what it does beyond that, and 100 is kind of the best performance. So we're looking for those magical sites that have 100. I'll let you take some photographs. Sorry, tell me if I'm going too fast, I'll slow down. So if you do a Lighthouse check, it gives you very concrete feedback on things that you could be doing to improve your site. So it really does all the work for you. And in this case, there could be some changes in images that will buy them another 0.5 seconds, the stuff they could do to reduce their speed by a whole 2 seconds. So there's very concrete help that Lighthouse can give you in terms of how to improve your performance. Who's heard of a progressive web app? Okay, hands up, please, please. Otherwise, I'll have to keep doing this for the rest of my life. Fantastic. Okay, so you've heard of a progressive web app. Great. It's an amazing piece of technology. We launched it a couple of years ago, I think about 3 years ago, and it is an app-like experience on the web that makes your site faster, smoother, engaging, frictionless. You can install it on your home screen, and it works offline. So it's magical. We announced this at Imagine and probably before that, but we have a partnership with Magento, and we've built something called PWA Studio, which is a framework and library of components that you can use to turn your Magento sites into PWAs. So again, come and see us at the booth. We can tell you a little more about it, but it's definitely technology that you might want to explore. How many of you built a PWA? How many of you tried to convert your site into Magento site? Yes? Magento site? Through PWA Studio? Not yet. Anyone given PWA Studio a run? Fantastic. Yay, amazing, great. So for those of you who still need to be convinced on PWA, let's just quickly talk through the Starbucks example. So obviously Starbucks is a brand you know and love and recognize. There'll be one downstairs. You can pick up a coffee. If you want to test that PWA, actually just go online now on your phones and find it. It's a fantastic mobile and desktop PWA experience. So the thing with Starbucks was they had a lot of app usage, of course, because they're a fantastic brand. But their DAUs, their monthly DAUs were higher on the web. So they were actually getting more engagement on the web. People were spending more time on their web property. And so they decided to invest in it. They built a PWA. They had UX parity with the native app. They had offline support. They built all of these things in. And they saw some amazing results. So it was 2 times faster than the legacy web experience. And they had a 65% increase in Starbucks rewards registrations. So it's definitely working for them. But what they also saw was that people didn't just use the PWA on their mobile. People were also using the PWA on the desktop. And so they actually saw a 25% increase in orders placed through the Starbucks PWA on the desktop. So the PWA is an amazing thing that actually works across formats, platforms, devices, and basically across all the 11 billion devices that we talked about. Okay, AMP. Now, I haven't really mentioned AMP in these conferences in the past because for e-commerce, AMP used to be a little bit challenging, but it's changed. So in April, when we had the AMP conference in Tokyo, we announced a couple of new features like AMP Script that actually makes it a little bit easier to use AMP for e-commerce. But AMP is a fantastic, easy to use, seamless technology that loads web pages beautifully. You can just create some amazing experiences from AMP. It's definitely user-centric. It's ROI positive. You can come and talk to us at the booth about this, but we've seen publishers increase revenue tremendously by using AMP. And it's open source, so it's built by the community. AMP has come a long way. So when we launched, it was initially for publishers. But we've seen, obviously, more verticals and more industries adopt AMP. I think there are billions of pages out there that are AMPed, but we've definitely seen a 30% increase in clicks from Google search that end up on AMP pages. So it's a growing, cool piece of technology. For e-commerce, we would definitely encourage you to consider using it for landing pages. It's still a challenge to build your entire site using AMP, but consider it for landing pages because that's where your user will land if they're looking for something from search, right? And it's going to be optimized and effective if you build that journey starting from search onto a landing page that's AMP. For more information, you can go to amp.dev. That's where all the information is. Let you take some photographs. You can also come and talk to us at the booth later. Okay, AMP for email. Something else we launched at the conference in Tokyo. Has anyone heard or tried AMP for email? Great. So it's this fantastic piece of technology where it's made email really interactive, where you can have real-time experiences, and it keeps your inboxes safe. So this is an example from something at Google. What used to happen with Google Docs was someone would send me a comment, and then I'd get a link, then I had to click on the link, open the doc, read the document, find the comment, and respond, right? What happens with AMP for email is all of this is built into your email. So you literally have to find the comment in your inbox and just respond to it, and you can do that immediately. And now for e-commerce, that means you can do all sorts of things. You can do RSVPs for invitation, you can do daily shopping deals, you can get people to interact with your brand inside your email communication, which you probably send a lot of, right? You send newsletters, you send offers, you send all sorts of things in the e-commerce company, and this just allows you to be a bit more interactive within your email communication. If you're interested, that's the link. But you'll find enough information on amp.dev as well. Cool? Okay. And finally, Google Pay. So we know, I mean, you guys must know, payment, checkout, and transactions are a big pain point, right? So everyone like browses and builds wish lists and makes carts and does everything. But when it actually comes to checkout, it's painful. We've seen a 69% of users actually abandon a site because there are too many steps once it gets beyond the browsing to actually purchase something. And 28% of folks abandon at the checkout process when they've actually got their cart filled. They know what they want, but they decide not to proceed with it because the form filling is just painful at that point. You've got to put in your username and your delivery details and your payment details and your card number. It's just awful, right? So we would recommend taking a look at GPay because it probably takes a couple of clicks. It has the advantage that obviously it's linked to all the Google accounts. So anyone with a Google account who's put in payment information, you can just use all of that to transact. It's got the scale of all the products that we have launched and built. So, you know, GPay is available on Chrome, on YouTube, on Gmail, on all sorts of Google services. There you go. And it's across the entire web. So it works across browser, it works across Android, it works across most platforms and services. It's also available in, I think, something like 69 countries. So it's available everywhere. And there are tons of brands using it already. And I think if you are a global brand, the advantage of using GPay is obviously you build one, you build for all. So you build, like I think Uber, Deliveroo have included GPay into their transaction flows. And that just means that you don't have to do anything else around the world. And it's available in the Magento marketplace as of June. So you could definitely experiment with the GPay extension now. And that's the short link if you wanted more information. Cool. So it's time for me to wrap up. Thank you for listening. Thank you for coming. We look forward to talking to some of you at the booth and doing lighthouse checks. But just a quick recap of everything that I said today. Performance on the web definitely matters. Speed equals revenue. Think about it, invest in it culturally, take it back, make sure there are systems that allow performance to live on into your organizations despite whether you are there or not. That's a challenge, but it's worth trying. Start off by quantifying the opportunity. So I gave you a couple of tools on trying to understand the money that you're leaving behind on the table if your web is not fast. Measure and improve site performance through things like Lighthouse, so it gives you some very concrete steps. Think about building progressive web apps because they're frictionless and offline. Definitely look at AMP, especially for landing pages. Dynamic interactive email with AMP for email, new, worth trying out. And finally, Google Pay in the Magento marketplace. Check that out for transaction flows. And with that, I'm going to wrap up and say thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day.